Hello, good morning. My name is Jan Mercer-Doms, and I'm the Vice President of U.S. Development with Mayshad Choice. As you know, we are an ecosystem of brands for women by women, connecting women to each other and to the companies, causes, institutions, and organizations that champion equity for women professionally and personally. I'm so thrilled to be with all of you here today. Thank you so much for tuning in and being such a strong supporter of everything that we're creating together at Mayshad Choice. You know, it's interesting right now is that we're in the middle of the pandemic, and for most of us around the country, this is also a moment in time where we're stepping back and reflecting upon the current political, cultural, social, and economic state of our country. I would like to read to you a little excerpt from an article that I saw today in Forbes magazine. And I think it really sets the tone for how all of us as individual human beings can really rise during this moment in time and think about how we can learn more about ourselves in how we support others from a humanistic perspective. The article is entitled 3 Things You Should Not Say to Your Black Colleagues Right Now, written by a woman who's a contributor at Forbes. What steps are you taking to become a stronger ally? What things are you unlearning about yourself? What are you saying to your racist friends and family members to ensure that they recognize the intentional or unintentional prejudice in their words? And in what ways are you supporting the fight against racism? Instead of telling us that you're scared to say the wrong thing, tell us about the conversations you're having with your non-Black family, friends, and family despite that fear. And show us that at least you are saying something, and not only to us, but to everyone in your communities. We at Mayshad Choice are here for you, and we will be engaging in incredible conversations going forward, including the continuance of our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion series, which is hosted every Tuesday at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We, of course, host Workshop Wednesdays, our Women in Money series here with you. Starting next week, we're actually going to be hosting that at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, so please make sure to adjust your schedules accordingly. And for our members, which I know so many of you are, please, please, please make sure to contribute and participate in our deep dive conversations in our Brain Trust, where we bring together diverse women across industries, job functions, professional and personal experiences to talk about the new world in which we want to create together moving forward. Thank you again for being with us here today. Please make sure to add your comments and questions to our comments bar in the chat field, and make sure to join us at joinmayshad.com to learn more about how you too can support our movement to change forever how women connect, engage, and support and do business together. Sue Matthews, who is the president of the Taylor Matthews Foundation, an advocate and an author for all things related to pediatric cancer. Welcome, Sue.
Thank you, Jan.
And Melissa Norden, who's the executive director of Bottommost Closet. Hi, Melissa. Welcome.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. So Sue is the president of the Taylor Matthews Foundation, a tay-bandz organization, which is a 501c3 organization, which was founded by her 11-year-old daughter, Taylor, who passed away from pediatric cancer at the age of 16. Sue is the author of Paint Your Hair Blue, a mother's longing to the enduring eloquence to her daughter's voice, not to let her be silent. A nationally recognized advocate for pediatric cancer, Sue and her team are changing the course of pediatric cancer treatment at institutions such as Columbia University Medical Center, Memorial Sloan Kettering, the National Institute of Health, and MD Anderson Cancer Center. Hi, Sue. Welcome.
Thank you.
And Melissa is the executive director at Bottommost Closet. She prior served as the SVP, Chief of Staff, and General Counsel in the Office of the President of the American Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals. She helped found New Yorkers for Clean, Livable, and Safe Streets, and in her corporate career served as counsel to Madison Square Garden, where she collaborated with the management of the New York Knicks, the New York Rangers, and the New York Liberty on raising funds for after-school programs for at-risk urban youth. Melissa serves on numerous boards, working groups, and committees, all dedicated to justice and equality. Thank you, Melissa. Thank you so much for the work you do as well.
Oh, thank you.
So Melissa and Sue, it's, I think it's such an interesting moment in time now as we think about just how the economic and political landscape of this country is changing so dramatically. And taking a step back from where we are today, but I would love for each of you to share your story as to how you got to where you are and why you're so passionate about the causes that you support and are engaged with, I'm sure seemingly on a 24/7, 365-day of the year perspective right now. Sue, I'll let you go first.
Well, I'm a CPA by trade, and I didn't know that I'd end up in philanthropy. And my daughter actually taught me herself. Out of the blue, she was diagnosed with cancer when she was 11 years old with no symptoms. We soon found out after that her treatment plan was 40 years old, which is now 50 to 60 years old. There's been no change in the treatment for her particular type of cancer. And she said to me, "Mommy, I don't want this to happen to other children. We could save one life, it would make all the difference." And she started the foundation, which was named tay-bandz, tay after her, and bands. She created little headbands, which we thought was kind of odd because she was bald. But she thought it was going to be a $5,000 bake sale at school, and it's turned into a multi-million-dollar fundraising operation that had gone international at one point. And my commitment, every morning I wake up and I think about her, and I'll never falter in my commitment to children with cancer, because the first time I ever heard the words from one of our scientists that we had funded that we saved the life of a child made my life and her life worthwhile. So rewarding. And I don't want any family or any child to go through what we did.
So you and I have had long conversations about this, and I think it's interesting, just the ways in which development and research for pediatric cancer is so much different than how we think about just cancer treatment for adults. Talk to us a bit about why that is and why that disparity exists.
Well, pediatric cancer is devastatingly underfunded by the government, receiving only 4.3% of the NIH, the National Institute of Health, cancer budget. And that's because it's rare. And they don't put an emphasis on children, whereas you don't realize that you're saving 70 years of life versus the average age. The average child gets diagnosed at 6. The average adult gets diagnosed at 66. So you're saving that many more years. But the problem is they say the survival rate is 80%. My daughter lived 4 years, 8 months. She would have been in that 80% survival rate if she had lived 4 more months. It's based upon a 5-year statistic, so it's really unrealistic. And kids, since they metabolize drugs so quickly, the doses of chemotherapy are so incredibly high that the toxic side effects, their lifespan is shortened dramatically after, even if they pass that 5-year mark and go into remission. But I wear many hats on the foundation, not only fundraising. I teach kids, elementary school kids, to learn philanthropy, and they fundraise. I have a big Zoom call with 100 kids next week to thank them for all the work they did even during COVID. But my segue into that is I'm very active on lobbying on Capitol Hill for pediatric cancer funds. And we did get last year, in 2018, the STAR Act passed, which was the most comprehensive childhood cancer act ever passed. So it's getting better.
Sue, talk to us a bit about the book you wrote, Paint Your Hair Blue. What's the inspiration for that? And what do you hope to achieve when the world reads it?
Paint Your Hair Blue was a combination. It has a resource at the back of the book to help families or anyone with cancer. Because basically, Taylor was given a 3-month prognosis. She was in school the day before, and I had the nerve, I don't know how, to look at the doctors and say, "You've got to be kidding me." They told me to take a long vacation and not treat her. And my husband and I said, absolutely no way. So we fought, and she lived, as I said, almost 5 years. So the book is a resource guide for parents and children with cancer. But even more than that, the subtitle of the book is A Celebration of Life in the Face of Pediatric Cancer. I start the book with saying, was my daughter's cancer journey successful, even though she lost her battle? Her journey was successful. She lived life to the fullest. She didn't let cancer stand in her way. She was a kid with cancer, not a cancer kid. We stuck out of the hospital. We did so many crazy things to make her live a full life. And I wanted to tell people that cancer isn't a death sentence. Don't stop your life. The book was done as a tribute to her, again, as another guide. And it emphasized the foundation. We've gotten a tremendous amount of new donors through it and raised a tremendous amount of awareness through the book. And it lives on in her memory. It's named Paint Your Hair Blue because blue is her favorite color, as you can see in my blue room. And when we told her she was going to lose her hair in 2 weeks, she didn't worry about it at all. She told other little girls, dye your hair pink. Boys, cut your hair in a mohawk. That was just part of the fun. You have 2 weeks till you lose your hair before, after chemotherapy. You have 2 weeks and have fun with it. So in retrospect, we should have painted her hair blue.
So as you know, I've heard you tell Taylor's story so many different times, and each time it, you know, what I'm most inspired by is her sense of hope and positivity through her entire story and her entire experience, and the fact that you know that passion now lives inside of you each and every day for the work that you do to really on so many different levels, from a fundraising perspective, from a healthcare perspective, from an advocacy perspective, and from an educational perspective, it really truly making so much difference in just how we really think about something that many of us just, you know, don't quite understand the complexity by which, you know, funds are become available for testing and for R&D and for clinical trials and all of those things that could drive the issues so much further forward. Thank you for everything that you do.
Thank you.
And Sue, this is something we also talk about because I'm a recovering CFO, you're a recovering CPA, and Melissa, you are an attorney that's reinvented your career as well.
Yeah.
We all have the theme of reinvention happening here. I love it. Melissa, tell us about your story.
Sure. Thank you. And thanks for your story, Sue. So I went to law school with the intention of working at a nonprofit my entire life. And everybody said, no, you have to spend a lot of years at a law firm first before they'll even think about you being able to work in-house at a nonprofit. And I said, okay. So I waited a little longer to find a job at a law school, possibly up to like 7 or 8 months. And I took a gamble that I'd find the right thing. And I had one of those life decision days. I got offered a job as the first general counsel of a company, making a lot of money, stock options, all of that. And the same day I was offered a job temp to permanent at a brand new foundation related to Madison Square Garden. So probably any sane person would have chosen job A, and I chose job B because that's what I always wanted to do. And I took a gamble that it would work out into something major. And you know, long story short, that foundation didn't go very far. But it really gave me the opportunity to go to where I wanted fairly early on in my career. So after being there under a year, I left and went to the ASPCA, which is going from a very fledgling organization that was brand new. I was the only employee of this foundation to an organization that had been around 140 years at the time I got there. And I thought I was going from something very, new and, unsupported to something very, very well established. And after I was there as associate counsel for 6 weeks, the general counsel left and they broke apart the legal function. And so I thought I left this thing which had, potential, but was not going as fast as I wanted to this thing which seemed so solid. And we all the lawyers, the 3 or 4 lawyers on the team got spread apart. And everybody went to the functional area they were working most closely with, which for me was the marketing team, because I was working on intellectual property licenses for the ASPCA brand related to pet products. And at that time, again, I was very disappointed because I did make this big choice and didn't have that traditional mentor relationship of a general counsel. And that was my dream of being a general counsel at a nonprofit. And it turned out to be one of the greatest bad things that ever happened to me, because I got to work on all these amazing corporate partnership deals with some major funders, Procter & Gamble, Subaru among them. And my boss was the SVP of marketing, and she was so generous because there were all these legal issues cropping up around the organization that were no longer handled by a central function. And it bothered me because I cared about the organization, even though I was in one specific area. So she gave me the flexibility to jump in when there were issues around the organization and I was concerned about them and work on them during the time I was being paid to work for her. Around the same time, unbeknownst to me, they were creating a new role of chief of staff. And I got called by the CEO and he said, come meet with me. And to me, I was such a, low man on the totem pole that I thought I was being called to the principal's office. And he offered me the job of chief of staff. And I looked at him like he was crazy because I was always on this traditional legal trajectory of general counsel in-house is my dream. And I said, I don't know if I can do this. I'm really busy with the legal work. And he said, no, you stop doing that and you do this. And I literally, I didn't know what to think because this was never on my plan. And I went home and thought about it that night. And I said, this is one of those opportunities you don't get offered twice. And so I took it on a contingency. I got to keep my hand in legal. So over the next decade, I rebuilt the legal function. Ultimately, I had 7 attorneys reporting to me. And I was the number 2 to the CEO during a time of tremendous growth. Our staff grew from about 100 people to about 800 people over that time. The budget grew from about 25 million to 180 million. I'm sure you remember things like the Michael Vick case, Hurricane Katrina, those Sarah McLachlan TV spots that make you cry. That was all part of my time. There also we had the #1 TV show on Animal Planet. So it was very busy. But I learned how to do everything you could possibly need to know in corporate or not-for-profit America because I ran such a big and complex organization. So another long story short, the CEO retired. And the organization decided to look on the outside for a new CEO, and I lost my job. And all the top staff were laid off. Everybody's C-suite was laid off. And I was someone who never thought I would lose my job. And I had a very hard time finding a job that I never expected. Everybody said, oh, with your legal background and all this experience in nonprofits, you're going to have no problem at all. And over 2 years, it took me to find my next job. And that was at Bottommost Closet. And it couldn't have been more serendipitous, quite frankly, because Bottommost Closet's mission is to inspire and guide disadvantaged New York City women to enter the workplace and achieve success. But for my savings, my education, my experience, I could have been one of our clients, half of whom are homeless. Half of them are single mothers. 83% of our clients are women of color. I think we all know women make 80 cents on the dollar compared to men, but that number drops to 63 and 54 cents respectively when we're talking about African Americans and Hispanics. And so I realized, I took the job at the time because I really needed a job. And women's issues and issues of the homeless were not my top passion. But 6 months in, I realized I ended up in the right place at the right time because I could speak so well to the issue because it had impacted me. So that's my story.
Thank you, Melissa. Thank you for sharing that. It's, I think it's interesting and I spent 10 years in the philanthropic sector myself, working for very strong gender-based organizations too. And I think that, so much of us are drawn to the world of philanthropy because of the personal connection and the personal passion that we bring to the table because we've experienced something for ourselves, right? No matter if it's from a health perspective or from a career perspective or just from, how we identify and the complex nature of our own identities. Let's shift it for a second to talk about kind of where we are right now. Mm-hmm. As we know, we're still in the middle of a pandemic, and we're also a country that's facing some really important, critical, and incredibly timely conversations and decisions that we need to make in this country about how do we become more humanistic ourselves? How do we become a part of a solution that really ensures, not just discusses, but ensures that there's equity and equality for all, no matter what family or what race or what nationality or what gender or what sexuality you're born into or how you identify for yourself and with your communities and with others. I'm wondering for each of your organizations, let's talk a bit about how COVID and the pandemic have truly affected and impacted both the business side of it from a fundraising perspective, from an employee perspective, and how are you ensuring that you're keeping your teams motivated during this time and engaged and enthused, but then also just from a programmatic perspective in the communities in which you all serve. Sue, I'll let you start.
From an employee perspective, we're not impacted at all because we have no paid employees. We're all volunteers. And volunteerism is actually up. Actual physical volunteerism is down because people are scared of COVID. But crisis brings philanthropy. Crisis brings people together in solidarity to want to help each other. So our volunteers have actually increased during this time. From a revenue standpoint, we're shifting all our events to online. But we've spoken to her and we've started a donor talking, the board members are talking to all of our large donors. Our demographics happen to be donors that are in the higher class, which are not as infected by COVID. So our large donors have committed that they're still going to donate as much. Fidelity Charitable Trust did a survey on people of what they thought their donations would be, and 54% said their donations would be stable, 25% said they'd increase their donations, and 21% said they were unsure because of the recession and the economy. Whether those donations go to non-COVID foundations or COVID foundations is yet to be cleared, but philanthropy itself is standing strong. Clearly, non-COVID foundations are at high risk. 4 out of 5 non-COVID foundations feel like they may not make it. We're not in that position because we're expense-wise, we're totally fine. But time will tell. We're not expecting, even though our large donors are committed to us, we're not expecting our donors to raise as much revenue as we have. And we have an additional problem is that research has translated to all COVID research. They're not doing as much pediatric cancer research. So we actually had several $100,000 that we had to grant out. And we just found the last place to put it, which happens to be with an underprivileged population. So it's treating children that were their insurance. It's research funding, but they wouldn't be able to get the research without our philanthropic dollars.
It's interesting, Sue, what you're saying about the distinction between COVID-related nonprofits and foundations versus, those that are directly serving populations that we would deem in the corporate world to be like kind of the essential businesses, and the distinction and just, the challenges that we'll see coming forward, particularly for many of those organizations that do rely upon city-state funding as well in the forms of reimbursable contracts. I'm wondering, Melissa, you and I were talking about before the show that you've had a very recent success in the fundraising space. And I'm so thrilled and happy for you and want you to talk a bit about that as well. But then also from a staffing perspective, what you're seeing and knowing that, again, 40 million Americans are unemployed, and how is that going to impact the work that you do?
Sure. So we actually talked about a virtual event back in the end of February, beginning of March, believe it or not. A staff member of mine has family in Europe, and she was concerned about how our event that was scheduled for May 13th in Midtown Manhattan was going to go. And I kept pushing her off about talking about it and researching. I said, that's never going to hit here. And it did. So, but we had started doing research on virtual event options. And the other thing we started doing was a lot of grants, a lot of the grants we apply for, you can apply for throughout the year. And we prioritize them based on the time we have to fill them out. And so she really started doing some of the grant applications we usually would do in the fall, in early spring. And her force, that I cannot take credit for it other than okaying it, really paid off, because March was really a dead month. We had just sent out our save the date for our event a couple of weeks earlier. Our invitation was set to go out like the second week in March. And I emailed even some of our closest supporters and, really loyal. Our organization is 21 years old, and there are people who've been giving to us since day one, and they're still very involved. And I got barely any responses from anybody who was involved in corporate America at all. And many of our individual donors, just radio silence for the entire month of March. And so we didn't officially pivot to the virtual event until sometime in April. I don't even remember the date, but it was fairly late. And there was really no one out there at the time who was doing it in a meaningful way. And over 6 weeks, we put together an event that took place entirely online. We had Susan Sarandon, who's been a supporter, send out an email about it. Christian Siriano, another supporter, had put things in social media about it. And Tina Fey was a surprise guest the day of the event. And we ended up raising almost $520,000 to date. I'm very proud to say we had set a goal. We didn't know what to set a goal for. Our original goal for the event was $775 in the room, as we usually do it. So people, kind of gave me advice, and I said, I have no idea what's going to happen. I'll tell you, in late March, early April, I said, if we make 200, I'll be thrilled. Even I'd say 3 days before the event, I said, we're never going to make 450. And people really came through. And I think it was just a matter of people, realizing that it was actually going to happen. And, what I said to people was, everything on your calendar is wiped out, right? My sister was supposed to get married this coming Saturday, actually. Her bridal shower, all those things leading up to it, all off the calendar. We need something on our calendar we know is going to happen and be a happy event and celebrate the work we're doing. And because we know our clients are going to need us now and more after this pandemic ends. So we were in a really good position to make it happen. And a number of our corporate supporters ended up coming through, but a lot of what we do is fashion. So a lot of what we do is outfit our clients for their job interviews. And the fashion industry is obviously being very hard hit. And we had not one fashion company sponsor us for the first time since I've been there over 4 years. But what I wanted to do is say, you have all been so generous to us, so let me find ways to help you. And so we had our first ever silent auction, which ended up taking place online. And I offered them all an opportunity to contribute something for post-pandemic. And then we did a virtual goodie bag, actually, and got to give them an opportunity to, get their name before an audience they didn't have before. And they paid me nothing for it, which ordinarily we wouldn't do. And they were all so grateful about it. So it ended up being great. We had clients who we were helping right now speak during the event, and it made it really meaningful. And so that's as far as our events. We've been very, very fortunate. I feel badly that, a number of organizations didn't make the call early on, because I have gotten a lot of calls from other executive directors and event planners about how we did it. And I think a lot of organizations pushed their event to later in the summer or the fall. And I don't foresee that being possible to have the typical 500-person event in a venue in Midtown Manhattan anytime soon. And also many charities usually get their funds twice a year, which is basically their event and year-end giving. And pushing those two close together could be catastrophic for those organizations. As far as what we've done during this time, we've worked to help our clients virtually. So what we're doing, today, the three of us are speaking to all of you. Most of our clients had never done that before. We offered no virtual opportunities because our clients are on very limited cell and data plans, something we don't think about. And just the opportunity to have a quiet space to talk it is not something, if you're living in your homeless shelter, that's easily attainable. And my direction to my staff was, they don't have a choice now. If they're going to get a job right now, it's going to be over the phone or over Zoom, and they have to be comfortable with that. And so we pivot to start training clients how to deal with virtual interviews, how to dress from the waist up for an interview. We're talking about virtual backgrounds and what you could, if you're in a space that's, not attractive for an interview, how to cure that. All the things that we could to help them. And I'm happy to say we've gotten a number of clients hired actually during this time who are essential workers, certified nursing assistants, workers at Amazon, grocery stores, things of that nature, security guards. Not all of them, certainly. We had taken a survey actually in late March, which seems like a lifetime ago now, that said 62% of our clients had seen their working hours change or lost their jobs completely. And 87% have had no paid sick leave. So if they got sick, they were in a lot of trouble. And we're actually in the process of taking that survey again, and I have a feeling the number is closer to 80% or more at this point. So while those are success stories, there are a lot of people who are unemployed, as Jan mentioned. And what also we're doing right now is preparing them for when the job market reopens. So we're doing virtual workshops for them. And we're covering things like COVID and your money. Our clients who have racked up a little bit of savings, should they keep it in the market? Should they take it out? What are their rights as tenants right now? How to keep themselves well. So if that's, physically well, mentally well at this time, legal issues that might be coming up for them. So we try to cover the gamut and also make sure their resumes are ready to rock as soon as the job market opens up. They have all the skills. The one thing we haven't been able to do is the clothing piece, and which is usually very core to what we do. So we are trying to figure that out right now. And I think one piece of advice that we've given people is that people understand right now things are different. And so you may not be dressing the same way you would because you don't have access to clothing. And our head of programs is actually a former head of HR in a very large bank. And she said she would really appreciate, when someone mentions that up front. which I thought was a really interesting piece of advice that we could give clients. So we really tailored the advice to the situation and what we know about our client base. And as far as our staff, we have furloughed one person just because we don't have the same volume of clients that we're currently dealing with. And we don't know when we will reopen or what that will look like. So that's where we're at this point.
Thank you, Melissa. I think it's interesting, when we think about, we talk about this extensively at Mayshad from a corporate perspective in the sense of, what are those characteristics of companies that will be able to thrive and survive post-pandemic? Knowing that, the Federal Reserve actually predicted that by the end of this year, 54 million Americans could be unemployed. And it kind of looks like we might be on that route, if not more. And so, we think it's interesting to hear the stories of people and individuals within companies about how they're shifting and pivoting to be more responsive to what's happening right now and being very flexible, much more flexible than in the past in the sense of how their business strategies are shifting as well. What I think you said around just the nature of timing, and Sue would love to get your thoughts on this as well, from the perspective of how nonprofit organizations manage cash flow, right? No matter if you're a grant-making organization or an organization that directly serves the end user, her or himself, and absolutely agree with, for most nonprofit organizations, they can be incredibly diversified in the sense of their revenue streams around contracts and grants and corporate giving and individual major donors, but any sort of shift in the economy can really unsettle and unnerve that. I think it's really interesting in the sense of the work that you're both doing, helping your organizations think through the inflows and outflows in very different ways, right? And Melissa really found what you said around nonprofits that typically consider their major sources of incoming funds to be their major event, and you're in fundraising. And I think it's really interesting, and kudos for you and your team of having the predictive capabilities to really plan in advance and say, okay, so we might not be able to do that gala even in November and December. And even if we could, would it make sense to do it when it's butted right up against year end fundraising? And I think you're right. I think many organizations will really struggle with that because it's, we think that it's going to be highly unlikely that even if we are able to go back to rooms of 500 people, that we'd actually want to be in a room with 500 people anytime in the near future. Right?
Yeah, and one thing I didn't mention is that we are very reliant on our volunteers, who I would say average age 75 plus. And our organization, as I said, was founded 20 years ago by women who were retired. So they're even, older crowd. And are they ever going to be comfortable in that setting again? I don't know the answer to that question at this point. So, that's a gamble. This is a gamble. And other organizations, may find success other ways. I'm just sharing our story. But I'm very glad that we did it at this point.
Sue, I want to go back to one thing that you were talking about earlier in the sense of, from that health perspective, that the pandemic from within the medical community, so much obviously out of necessity, needs shifted to focus in on that area and the way in which that's impacted those nonprofit organizations that are also very actively committed and dedicated their missions to healthcare for whatever group or subgroup of individuals, has really seen a shift in the sense of just the openness of being able to deliver services now. How do you think that will shift going forward for the work that you're doing?
I think we're definitely at a disadvantage in fundraising because I think it will continue to be COVID-related industries that will, and nonprofits and organizations that will continue to get the dollars, and they're much needed dollars. I think from a general, besides the nonprofit standpoint, a lot of health issues are going to come out of COVID. A lot of people, there's going to be a lot of cancer because people didn't get their checkups. People are postponing treatments. They're afraid to go to the hospital. Who knows what the long-term effects of COVID are going to be. So I think there's going to be a tremendous amount of research that is going to continue on COVID even after we have a vaccine. But kids still get cancer. Adults still get cancer. The world goes on. We have to keep on continuing to do the best we possibly can underneath the circumstances that we have.
Do you think also that this is a moment in time then, and Melissa, you had alluded to this as well, in the sense of, new opportunities for partnerships to come up to support the work that you do, that you both do? And are there innovative ways where, I know, Melissa, you had mentioned that Tina Fey, spoke at your, your gala event. And, are there innovative ways to bring in, other organizations or agencies or companies? And Sue, I think you're spot on when you say that there will be many different health consequences and health effects that arise because of COVID, right? And we're already seeing that in the way in which it affects the body, even after you've recovered from the virus. And does that open up doors for possibilities, just in the sense of, whether it's around the storytelling or the marketing and branding and the delivery then of services, or how you seek those partnerships? Will that change for you, Sue, do you think?
Oh, it definitely will. We've already started working with other nonprofits in the area, looking for grants that are more appropriate, because our mission has always been and always will be that we're funding dollars that reach kids today, not years or days from now, miles of red bureaucratic tape or trials. And that was in order to grant all of our money this year, we worked with other organizations. And there's definitely synergy among organizations. I've had calls that they're willing to offer me social media for free because they don't have clients, things of that nature. But nonprofits are helping each other much more. There's a coalition against cancer that is for all the nonprofits, pediatric cancer nonprofits in the United States. And the coalition is putting people together to work. And it decreases expenses, brainstorm with them, things of that nature.
That's really fascinating, Sue, because, it was always my experience in the past that nonprofits often wouldn't collaborate with each other because there was this assumption that they were all competing with each other for the same resources, right? From foundations and from corporations and from individuals. Do you think this opens up a whole different way in which, that sort of mindset and philosophy may completely shift and pivot?
Oh, I think it absolutely does. I think one of the positive effects of COVID and even the riots and the protests is going to be that people realize how life is so much more important. They want to belong to a community. They've been isolated. They want to join nonprofits. They want to do something good. We need positive energy. All we hear is negativity on the news. So I think people are much more willing to share. Their egos are much lower. And I think the whole social dynamics of the way people interact have changed so dramatically. And that's why I think philanthropy as a whole is dramatically up, and that's a lot because of the billionaires have donated to COVID. But also people have time now and they want to belong. Mm-hmm. They want to make new friends and they want to, it's so, when COVID or non-COVID, when I thank my volunteers for running an event, they say, "No, thank you, Sue. You gave us the gift of giving." I talked to these little 6th graders and they're so excited to hand me a check because they did a bake sale. The gift of giving is a tremendously rewarding experience and something that you can do during this time.
Thank you, Sue. Thank you. Melissa, are you seeing something similar happening with your, because I'm, and Sue, actually you just answered my next question around the intrinsic values of being a part and feeling that sense of belongingness with the nonprofit work, and why do we do it? Either as heads of organizations or founders or volunteers and employees. And I think that you're spot on in the sense that there's something right now that's happening just in the sense of how we all think about, like, really truly, not to sound esoteric, but what is really truly the meaning of life, right? And what is the world that we want to live in? And Melissa, I would imagine that this is the same for you, given the sense that your organization is very much driven by volunteers as well.
Absolutely, and we already work, with over 200 agencies around the 5 boroughs of New York City who refer clients to us. Homeless shelters, domestic violence victims organizations, groups that work with the formerly incarcerated, LGBTQ community. So we already had this partnership going. But one way that I've tried to help is actually talking about the event we had and knowing that so many organizations have, kind of struggled to put something together right now. There's a national organization called the Alliance for Career Development Nonprofits. That's an organization of groups like ours around the country, and we're by far the largest. But I actually did a webinar with them on how to do this, how to put it together, offered to be a resource for organizations. So reached out in that way. And our volunteers are amazing. They really miss being there. Again, for a lot of them, they are retired. This was their second career, or maybe their first, opportunity in the business place because they were stay-at-home moms working at home, and they miss it a lot. And we've tried to give them virtual opportunities. And at first, a lot of them were hesitant, mostly due to age and conflict with technology. But now they're learning along with the clients, and they love that. We've had actually every 2 weeks a volunteer town hall, like, we had about 50 people on sessions online. And a lot of it is like, oh, how are you? It's good to see you. It's like when your grandma kind of waves on a virtual chat. But now they're getting comfortable with it, and we're having real discussions, and it's great. And that network is very, very powerful. And they really relish the opportunity. And it's funny, March is actually Women's History Month. And we had 20 some odd events planned for March with different corporations around Women's Month stuff. And 100% of them got canceled. Every day it was a new one before we even closed. And it was, really sad. Obviously, a lot of work went into planning those events. And, for the past couple of months, it's been radio silent. Well, over the past week and a half, for some reason, everybody is woken up, and I'm getting every hour a corporation that wants to work with us and find ways to work with us virtually. We're doing virtual career days now, where our clients can have, mock interview sessions with someone in a big corporation. We're doing online workshops with corporations. We actually have a 3-part series we're starting with Blackstone, which probably would not have been offered to us 3 months ago. So that's a silver lining. I'm finding silver linings every day, and I think those opportunities wouldn't have been available to our clients. And even with the workshops, I know I mentioned them earlier, but we have a very small space. We're limited to 20 clients in the room. Our first workshop out, we had 38 people online. So we are changed forever in that whatever happens in a physical space, we are now going to have these opportunities virtually and be able to hit so many more people.
I think it's, it's so true. And we found this at Mayshad as well, is that now we're able to connect with women nationally, if not globally. Whereas in the past, our live events, we love live events, and I really miss being in the city each and every day. But, it's, I think, interesting to see now how people are craving connection in different ways. And also because we're having conversations like this, and we host workshops and small group discussions. And in a way, I feel like we're also getting closer to each other because this moment in time is so different, right? And so no matter if we're experiencing this directly or indirectly, we're still all impacted by it. Right. And so to be able to see in each other's homes and, get a sense of, what do we look like when we're not spot on perfect 100% of the time?
Yeah, no, it's a great point, because I didn't mention earlier with our virtual event, we are usually limited to 500 people who can afford a $500 ticket or more at Cipriani on a given Wednesday and can get out of work. And we had people participating from all around the country, all around the world, who had never heard about Bottommost Closet. And we got so many more gifts the day of, texts to give, than we ever had. So, again, another silver lining is an opportunity to introduce your organization to many more audiences. And so, yeah, I think there are a lot of silver linings, and I just hope they stick. I think after major events, people have a certain passion, a certain quietness to how they react to things. Everybody's been very patient about, processing their gifts and things like that. And that'll change at some point, right? And we've certainly seen that after other events like 9/11 and Hurricane Katrina, Sandy, et cetera. It's really great right now, and hopefully people use this time to make a change.
I honestly like to think that personally we're at a very pivotal moment in time, because there's so much that's happening right now that's really shaking, I think, how we think about what does it mean to be an American citizen? What does it mean to live in this country? What does it mean to be, a human being, honestly? And so I agree that I really hope that it sticks as well. Sue, we had talked a bit about the CARES Act, and we know that many of us are familiar with the CARES Act in the sense of, funding small businesses, and, it's been received and experienced with mixed success. And I'm wondering how the CARES Act has affected the philanthropic world as well.
The CARES Act has, for right now, the money that's available has tremendously saved the philanthropic world. 501(c)(3)s are eligible for loans under the Payment Protection Program. They can borrow 2.5 times monthly their payroll expenses, up to $10 million. And under most situations, if that money is used, if they maintain their salaries up to $100,000 and they rehire or maintain all their employees, most of that money is forgivable. So that's tremendous coverage of expenses for right now. They've also given back the full deduction for federal income tax purposes if you itemize, which is huge, which was taken away in the Tax Act a couple of years ago. The Emergency Economic Industry Disaster Grant was $10,000, and basically they gave it out immediately, whether you qualified or not, and you didn't have to give it back. That is now limited to agricultural grants, so that's not yet no longer available to the 501c3s. And the Payment Protection Program is for 500 or less employees. If you have 500 or more employees, you're eligible for the Economic Stabilization Fund, which is limited to a $2 million loan. And you have to retain and restore compensation, but that is non-forgivable, but refinanced up to 30 years. So the government has certainly, now you hear the win stories where we got our $10 million loan like that, and you hear the stories where they're not giving out the Emergency Advance Fund anymore. Mm-hmm. So, and certainly the money that's put aside for small business is much less than it was in the beginning. But anyone that got on their applications very quickly are stable and up and running now to cover their expenses for a while.
From both of your perspectives, what do you think the biggest need will be going forward in the philanthropic world? Knowing that the answer to this may shift in the next couple of months as we learn more about the pandemic, and will there be a second wave, and the effects of the election, and et cetera, but wondering, from where you both sit right now, what do you envision will be the greatest need and your greatest need?
For us, it's continuing to get dollars. It's uncertain. We have our large donors, but our small donors are definitely at risk. And the more people that become unemployed, the less the donations are going to come in. So we will survive because our expenses are so low, and we will come out of this. But every day that we don't give $1 to a child research grant to save a child's life is every day that a day in a child's cancer, their life is extremely short. So we don't want to lose a year of it.
So I'm wondering if you could share with our viewers today, what is the impact of the monies that you raise? And I was astonished the first time you told me it was around the impact of just even $5,000 in the sense of, helping to save a child's life. Talk to us a bit about that in the sense of the seemingly simplicity of, how little money it takes to actually make a big difference.
The $5,000 number is a key number that we use to fundraise, and a key number. We funded sequencing, which is precision medicine, genome sequencing to find the DNA mutation in a child's tumor. So it's no longer one size fits all chemotherapy for this class of sarcomas. It is now, we'll look at the individual gene types of the individual child's tumor. We started funding that in 2012 at Columbia University Medical Center, Morgan Stanley Children's Hospital, which is the only children's hospital in New York City. And at that time, it cost an average of $5,000 to sequence a child's germline. So that had $5,000 had the potential of saving a life. They thought, we just had a big conversation with the doctors last week, they thought that by 2020, insurance would be covering a large part of it. The cost of $5,000 has gone up to about $7,000 because they're down not only doing DNA sequencing, but RNA sequencing. But the insurance, some people's insurance companies will cover the whole thing. Some will cover $2,000, and the majority of the companies don't cover any of it. And that is because Columbia University is at 168th Street and serves an underprivileged population. So that's also been one of our goals, is to save those children. No child should be subject to not receiving treatment because of their demographics or their economics. So $5,000 could easily save a child's life, and we have evidence that $5,000 has saved a child's life. We've also funded Memorial Sloan Kettering, a study we funded 6 years ago for an illness that hits teenagers and was 0 to 5% survivable, basically terminal. And now that was an antibody study, and now 5 years later, the survival rate is up to 50%.
Wow.
And that was not an extraordinary, that was a couple $100,000. It was not an extraordinary amount of money either.
Mm-hmm. So at the end of our conversation, I'm going to ask both of you to talk about how we can all get involved as well. Because I think that there are so many different ways, from writing checks to advocacy to education to volunteering to mentoring. So I do want to come back to that, but Melissa, I do want you to talk about from your perspective, what do you see the biggest risk to the philanthropic sector to be going forward?
Right. So obviously dollars as well. But interestingly, another thing about the virtual event was that we usually don't have small dollar gifts. It really is, people who can give 3, 4, and 5-figure gifts. And a great thing was we got a lot of people who gave $10, $25, which we never get. So we've actually been able to build up our smaller dollar donor base. But I think the second issue we have, which a number of nonprofits will have, is that of real estate. So we're paying for a space we're not using. Our space is very small, and now with whatever the social distancing guidelines will be when we come back, it's not going to work for us in the same way, and won't be able to maximize the number of clients we can handle in that space. And so that's an issue for us and others. The good news is that there'll be a lot of cheap space on the market, I guess, for organizations that are going to have people work from home permanently and things like that. If you can get out of your lease, now would be a good time probably. We don't have that luxury right now, but I think that's a big issue for nonprofits across the country.
I'm going to go to questions from our audience. Our first question, Melissa, is directed to you. Where does the name for Bottommost Closet come from? What's the origination?
So, we call ourselves Bottommost Closet because we are an organization that has, part of what we do is clothing, right? But call it bottomless because you think you're just getting clothing when you come in the door, and you get so much more. So you get access to someone who is going to help you work on your resume, work on mock interview skills, offer workshops on financial management, professional development, and personal enrichment. So it's really the bottomless closet.
I like that. I think we often equate, bottomless closet, or at least, I did in the beginning until I learned more about the work that you do, as a place where, women bring clothing to help other women dress to their best possible version of themselves, to be, ready for job interviews and to be ready to, go back into the professional world. But it's fascinating, particularly now, to learn how much you've grown just because of COVID, in the sense of the resources and the programs that you're offering. Love everything that you're doing.
Thank you.
So the next question, Sue, goes to you. How can we become more involved in the work that you're doing? No matter if it's, writing a check or volunteering or getting involved, where would you like help to come from?
I would like help to come from volunteers. I mean, certainly we're writing a check. We're also looking for new board members. We're looking to diversify our board. We'd love to speak to you about that. And volunteers to run virtual events. That's what our spot is lacking right now. We have our scheduled events to work. And to raise awareness. September is Pediatric Cancer Awareness Month. It's going to fall by the wayside. It's usually a tremendous event in Times Square. Color for pediatric cancer is gold, and there's usually a huge ceremony, and gold ribbons go up on all the billboards in Times Square. That's going to go by the wayside this year. So we need new bodies and new audience. So we're welcoming anybody, just reach out.
That leads to my next question. And Melissa, I want you to, be able to talk about, what you would like help with as well. So let's do that first, and I'll save my next question for next.
Sure. So obviously, funding is, even though we did very well right now, funding is still going to be a struggle. We have no idea, as most charities don't, what year end is going to look like, because we don't know where we'll be with a second wave or anything like that. So funding is very important. Volunteers are also important, but experiences for clients. So the more companies we can partner with, who might have job opportunities as they reopen that our clients can fill, who might have educational opportunities for our clients, might be willing to be a mentor. Those are invaluable experiences that you can't put a price tag on. And they cost us nothing, they cost the company nothing, and the benefit for the client is tremendous.
Melissa, do you sense that you'll need more inventory then too, as we all kind of go back out there? Or how are you managing that right now?
Yeah, so one of the things that you mentioned earlier was about partnerships that were unique and, out of this time. And I was going to mention that a little moving company, partnered with a real estate firm and did a clothing drive for us citywide, Manhattan-wide, actually, for 2 weeks leading up to our luncheon. And they actually, for the first time, went to buildings in the city and picked up for us, which is huge because we often get calls about getting people's clothing donations to us, and we don't have the resources to pick up. But they volunteered to do that for 2 weeks, and it was really valuable. So and we got a lot of clothing that way. But we will have, again, we hope when the job market reopens, it may be gradual, but we don't know. There could be some big changes that will come and it'll all of a sudden hit, which will be a good problem to have. But we'll definitely continue to need inventory. And we never get enough clothing in plus sizes. We never get enough good handbags, and we never get enough good shoes, because people don't tend to donate shoes because they're either worn to the ground or they love those shoes or whatever it is. But we need a perfect black flat. And also realizing that many of our clients only have sometimes a pair of sneakers that came into the office, and that's all they have, and they're going to jobs mainly where they're on their feet all day. Mm-hmm. So having a really good solid pair of shoes is something that's really important. So yes, people are home cleaning out their closets, which is a great thing, and I've gotten a lot of calls like, what can you do with our stuff? And we actually are open by appointment right now to take clothing donations. So if you reach out to info@bottomlesscloset.org about setting a time if people want to drop off, but there will be needs in the future for sure.
Both of you sit on so many other boards as well, and are part of advisory committees and are advisors yourself. Sue, I want to go back to something you just said around, you want more board members too. Many of us have never sat on a nonprofit board. Talk to us a bit about what does that entail? Like what could we expect? What ways, are there opportunities to give once you become a board member? And then, what are the roles and responsibilities of a nonprofit board member?
To assume, an assumption being on a nonprofit board is that you will write a check. We don't demand a certain amount of money. We're very low on that scale. Our board members do donate, but we try to get board members with a certain skill set. Like we have pro bono attorneys, we have pro bono accountants, we have a journalist on our board who writes our blogs and writes our information, writes our annual campaign letter. We have fundraising experts on our board. So depending upon your expertise, you're asked to volunteer your services as needed. And everyone's required to fundraise a bit.
Yeah, if I could dovetail on that, I can tell you that, it's people think that they don't have the skills to help a nonprofit. So they don't look to participating on a board because of what they do. That's not true. Like Sue mentioned, someone who was a journalist would be a great person to have who can write. Someone with real estate experience, like I said, right now real estate is such a huge issue for nonprofits. Like that would be a great skill set to have. Technology, technology is really expensive. Having someone with that background on your board is really helpful. So it's really, and I just kind of also just mentioning being very sensitive to the moment that philanthropy has not been a very diverse field, unfortunately, and many nonprofit boards do not reflect the client base that they serve. And so any opportunity to diversify those boards is really appreciated by the industry. And, even in the volunteer pool, to make sure your volunteer pool is diverse as well.
Any skill set really fits a volunteer board, no matter what industry they're in. Mm-hmm. We have one sole male on our board. The rest of us are female, so.
He's a very brave soul.
We actually don't have any men on our board, but we're open to having a man. There just hasn't been the right fit yet. It's funny, like you're saying, it's for him it's awkward, but the more men that are involved, the better the conversation. Women are going into workplaces with men. I think one thing that's changed since I've been there is we've sort of changed shying away from problems, right? So we've had a lot of domestic violence victims come through our door. And the answer was always, we don't want male volunteers because they'll feel uncomfortable. I said, I'd rather they be uncomfortable in our space than tomorrow when they go into a meeting behind a closed door with a male person in HR with no windows and they're alone, and to prepare them for that moment. Mm-hmm. So, having diverse opinions around the table and experiences is the best experience for everybody, I think.
Such a good point. Thank you so much, both Sue and Melissa, for being with us here today. Oh, before we leave, let's let our viewers know how they can reach you. Sue, your site is?
Website is taylormatthewsfoundation.org, and our email is info@taylor.matthewsfoundation.org. Matthews with 2 T's.
And Melissa?
Yeah. So our website is bottomlesscloset.org, and you can email info@bottomlesscloset.org.
Thank you. Thank you both. This has been such an inspiring conversation. I think exactly what we needed right now too, as well. And I encourage all of you out there to become more familiar with Sue's organization and Melissa's organization. And again, I think that this is such an incredible moment in time for all of us to sit back and revisit those causes and causes that are so near and dear to our hearts, and figure out ways that we can get involved with new ones as well. I'm Jen Mercer-Doms, the Vice President of U.S. Development with the Mayshad Group. Please, you're welcome to join us this evening. Inspiration to get us through the next week. And we start off every week with Dr. Risa Reiger, who are investor and clinical psychologist who helps set our week up for success, and followed, of course, by our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion show Tuesdays at 4 p.m. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you. And please, we'd love to hear from you. And so please feel free to drop us a line and give us your thoughts and ideas. And can't wait to continue to create the future together. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.